Thank you for that. Our reading today is from Genesis chapter 1. If you've got one of the cart Bibles out there, you could probably find that on page 1. All right. So we're just going to look at the first two verses today. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. I would like to suggest to you that the first words of the Bible, the first 7 words, have shaped your world and our world more than any other words ever spoken. Now, there are 9 words in English, but 7 words in Hebrew came and produced so much change and we live in that change, and we live in that hope in ways that we don't even realize. And when we get to look at this and we get to understand this, it gives us a vision of hope and of confidence. Just from the areas of science, of thought, of philosophy, of religion, just about the foundation of just about everything that's even studied comes back to the truths of those first 7 words. Like Zach said, we are starting a series of Genesis in the book of Genesis, and we're calling it our story. Because if we're going to understand who we are, we need to understand our story. You can consider it the prequel for your current life. Knowing how you got to where you are helps shape knowing where God is going to lead you. And in order to understand this book, we need to go back to the very place it was first written. So in your mind, I want you to go back to probably somewhere between 16th and 18th century BC, the plains of Arabia, the oasis underneath the Mount of Sinai, where the people of Israel had just left Egypt, and they were there, and they were gathering themselves, and Moses was meeting with God, and they were getting an understanding of who they were. The problem is, I don't know if they knew who they were. What you might remember this story that they'd gotten through the Red Sea and they'd gathered to Sinai. Moses went up the mountain, and he had been there 30 some days or so, and people just started freaking out. They're like, "What are we doing here? Who is leading this thing? What is going on?" They didn't know what to do with themselves, and so this movement came, and it's going to sound really weird to us because, like, why would you do this? But it seemed very natural. What do you do when you don't know who you are and you don't know what to do? You do what everybody else does. What did everybody else do at that time? In Egypt and in Canaan, everybody else, well, they had gods. And the gods were their anchor point. And they were like, we need a god. And so while Moses is away, they corner Aaron, and they're like, Aaron, we need a god. And Aaron's like, oh, I thought we had one. They're like, no, we need like something we can look at. And he's like, all right, well, give me your gold. And next thing you know, they make this golden calf. And by the time Moses comes down, they are worshiping around this golden calf. Why? They didn't know who they were, and they didn't know how they were going to get to wherever they were going unless they had some sort of leadership, some sort of anchor point. And what did they do? What do you do when you don't know who you are? You do what everybody else does. And they started their own little pantheon. And of course, Moses had to shut that thing down. But what was very clear is that this was a people who had lived in slavery for decades, if not centuries. Their identity was as slaves. Their identity was to have masters. They didn't get to choose when to go to the bathroom, right? Let alone go choose exactly how they're going to be and how they're going to organize a nation, right? They needed to know who they were. And so fundamental to that time on the Mount of Sinai, Moses, who was uniquely equipped to do this, right? Because he grew up in Pharaoh's household. He was trained to read and to write. He knew the Hebrew stories. And he probably took the Hebrew stories that had been written down, that had been collected, and he assembled the book of Genesis. Why? Because the people of Israel needed to know their story. What was going to happen is that they were going to go into Canaan, and there's going to be, each one of the nations around them were going to have their own pantheons of gods, right? And if they didn't know who they were, what are they going to do? What everybody else did, right? And so how are they going to know who they are? How do you know who you are? You have to know your story. We understand who we are by the way we know our story. Good, right, and wrong, right? There's some parts of our story that we just misunderstand, and we misunderstand even who we are. Well, if they were going to understand who they were going to need to know their story, and they were going to need to know their God. So I have one very specific hope for our series, is that we would come out of this knowing who we are from our story. And that would give us hope for holiness, that we would find hope in holiness. Each and every single one of us would know that we are holy, set apart by God, known by Him, loved by Him, that we have been specifically created by God. We're not like everybody else. We don't have to do what everyone else is doing. We don't have to worry about FOMO, fear of missing out. We don't even have to worry about FOBO, right? Fear of a better offer, right? We don't have to worry about those things. Why? Because we have God. And we have a great story, and we can live in that story. And no matter what everybody else is doing, they're going on a better vacation, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're freaking out about this. Even Christians are freaking out about this. Christians are freaking out about this. We don't have to be people of fear. We get to be people of power, of hope, courage, and love. We don't have to be like everyone else. I remember after I graduated college, and we had a 2-bedroom apartment, and the 4 of us were sharing it. And there was one night I was just kind of by myself, and I realized all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a second, I've got a college degree, and I have no commitments. I could do anything. Well, anything that didn't require money, I could do. I was like, what? And within about seconds, I remember this thought pop into my head. I'm like, I could do anything. Oh boy, I should get a girlfriend. And it wasn't like, oh, I could get a girlfriend. I'm like, no, I might just do anything. I need a girlfriend to anchor me down, right? And I didn't. But what was driving it was the fear of being free. The fear of being free. If you don't know who you are, you won't know what to do with the freedom given you. And make no mistake, in Jesus' death and resurrection, you have been freed from sin and death. But if we don't know who we are, what are we going to do? What everybody else does. So back to Sinai. When the people of God go into Canaan, and they were going to find all sorts of pantheons that they were going to need to deal with and respond to. And where did they come from? Egypt. And they had their own pantheons. All right? So as they moved into the promised land, they needed these 7 specific words. I'm telling you, these 7 specific words will change all of history. All right? I initially had 5 things that we're going to talk about when it comes to those. We're only going to get to 3 things. The first one is this: God is all-powerful. Everything has been created by God. Absolutely everything. All things submit to Him. This morning, I got up early and I was able to get out and see the stars. I was able to see Orion. I was able to see the bow, and I was able to see the North Star. I was able to see those stars. In our galaxy, there's 100 billion of them. I don't even know how to write that. There's 100 billion of those stars. God created every single one of those stars. Every single one of them he created. 100 billion. I'm pretty sure if you wanted to count to 100 billion, 1 second at a time, it would take you, I'm pretty sure it would take you 120 years even to count to that. And he created all of them. But not just that. There's 100 billion galaxies in the universe. 100 billion stars in our galaxy, and 100 billion galaxies at least, and that's a low number. Some Google this morning suggested somewhere between 200 billion and maybe 2 trillion. I don't know. It's like these numbers and these distances, and yet the universe is continuing to expand. God created every single one of these things. What's important to know here, particularly that's different, that was introduced, that wouldn't have been different before, is that God is before matter. This is the first time it was ever conceived. You go look at all the ancient Near Eastern literature, there's a whole bunch of creation stories out there, but all of those gods, they create the earth out of substance that is already there. They're working with what they got, right? And so the gods themselves are victims to matter itself. Let me see if I can explain why this would mean something, all right? This past week, I had a classic office situation. A Gen Xer who works on our staff. I don't know who that might be, but this Gen Xer was having tech problems. And he was getting frustrated, and he was getting angry. And so what did he do? What did he or she do? He went to a millennial after he said, I hate technology, I'm getting angry about this, and he spilled his irritation or her irritation on them, and started listing all the things that are wrong with the world. And then what happens next? That person says, well, I just can't do technology, right? I started gaslighting myself. This is what happens with technology, right? We get angry, we start spilling on others, then we tell a story that there's something wrong with the world, then we tell a story that there's something wrong with ourselves. This can all happen in like 5 minutes, right? We declare hatred against all technology, we irritate the people around us, we cast judgment on the world, and then judgment on ourselves because something isn't working. And imagine if someone came along and then told you your Wi-Fi is off. This was not the issue here. But imagine if your Wi-Fi was off. Since you have no signal to the internet, none of the things you are doing is going to work. All right? Let's see if I can get this thing back to my point. All right? If you are made for a connection to God and you've turned that connection to God off, nothing is going to work. You're going to say there's something wrong with the world. This is going to say there's something wrong with me. You're going to be angry. You're going to be irritable. You're going to build all these workarounds in life. Why? Because you are trying to do things disconnected from the Creator. If you don't have a signal between you and your God, your entire life will be a workaround. Yes, maybe you can make a bunch of money and throw your money at it, or maybe you could work hard and prove that you're a good person and feel okay about yourself while managing a bunch of fear along the way. Maybe things will go really well in that subset of the population that you get to live in, but make no mistake, everything will be a workaround. Why? Because you have no signal. And it is the world we live in that if you believe that matter comes first, you're always going to be afraid of matter. You're going to need a horoscope. You're going to need crystals. You're going to manage addictions. There's always going to be a workaround. You're going to wonder if the universe is talking to you because there's the matter and the universe over here, and then there's maybe a God who's got some juice or whatever. No, the universe is not talking to you. The only thing the universe does is declare God's glory and praise. It responds to the universe. It's humans who have the issue of not listening to God. If there is a God in this world who is all-powerful, all you need is a sufficient relationship to him. And if you try to work it without that, it will be a workaround and things will be broken. God is all-powerful. He has all the power that you and I need. His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. Second thing about these 7 words is this: God is self-sufficient. God is fully sufficient in his self. If you read the pantheon stories, the stories that the rest of the world were coming up with to support their pantheons, it was like reading the Real Housewives of Mesopotamia, right? It was all drama. There are some things, if you read some of these stories, I can't read some of these stories in public. Why? Because it's dark. It's just a projection of humans. Think about the folks who were writing these pantheons. It was the wealthiest and most powerful of their little clans and their little tribes. And what did they write? They wrote about projections of themselves. Scholar Ken Marduk said it this way. He said, referring to these pantheons as myths, he says, myth was not just entertaining fable. It contained a heavenly imitation of earth. So think Thor, think like the Egyptian gods, right? All right, so these things. It conveyed a heavenly imitation of earth, like a cosmic mirror that reflected terrestrial and human experience. Myth is like looking up into heaven and seeing ourselves masquerading as gods. Therefore, the gods have the properties of everyday human experience and feelings: love and marriage, giving birth, fighting, and war. The gods were truly the creations of man. Ancient myth then tells of a threatening and unpredictable world where the gods operate, placing society at their mercy. In those day and ages, people didn't have a sense that there's justice at the center of the universe, or that there was order at the center of the universe. You would never even attempt science if you had a worldview where everybody was like, where it was all drama all the time. Pick your drama. Sports radio, right? Professional wrestling, cable news, whatever drama you like, this is what they had in their gods. I'll give you just one example. This is probably the most famous of the creator, Marduk. All right, this is the summary of the story. I'm going to move real quick. In the beginning, there were only 2 primordial waters: Apsu, who was fresh water and male, and Tiamat, who was salt water and female. From them, younger gods were born. The younger gods became noisy, which angered Apsu. He planned to destroy them, but before he could, the younger gods killed him. Tiamat was enraged and created an army of monsters to take revenge. She placed Kingu, her new consort, in command. The gods were terrified, but Marduk, a young storm god, stepped forward. He promised to defeat Tiamat if the gods would make him their supreme ruler. They agreed. Marduk went to battle, captured Tiamat in a net, and killed her with an arrow. He split her body in 2. One half became the sky, and the other half the earth. Isn't that lovely? Our planet is the half carcass of a female bloodlusting god. All right. From Kingu's blood, Marduk created human beings. That feels good too. Whose role was to what? Serve the gods. Finally, the gods built the great city of Babylon, which Marduk enthroned as the chief deity. This is what all the stories were like. And what you just need to know is God is not needy. He's not needy. He doesn't need your worship. He doesn't need your obedience. He doesn't need your praise. He doesn't need your prayers. He doesn't need your affection. Does he want it? Absolutely. There's a scene in the first episode of Band of Brothers. I don't know if you've seen that series or not, but the main character, Lieutenant, ended up becoming Captain Winters, found, Lieutenant Compton gambling with those underneath his charge. And and Winters calls him out on it. It's like, you're gambling with them. And Compton's like, whatever. This is what soldiers do. And Winters says, never put yourself in a position where you can take from them. It's a good leadership principle. But God is not in a place where he needs to take from you. And here's why this is really, really practical. When it comes to suffering, God doesn't need your suffering. He doesn't need you to take one for the team. Every hardship we face will be fully redeemed. Every suffering you experience will produce a glory that is beyond what any of us could imagine. He doesn't need your suffering. We will go through hardships in life, but it's not like he can't handle it. No, he is working things out because, well, remember, he can create the universe. He's working things out so that every single suffering, just like the suffering of Jesus was redeemed, every single moment of suffering will be redeemed, just like the resurrection of Jesus redeemed his death. He is not needy. He's fully sufficient. Third, there's hope in holiness. There's hope in holiness. You don't have to be like everyone else. You don't have to compete with everyone else. Are there laws of the universe? Do you need to eat? You need to drink? You need to pay your rent? There's certain basic ways God has made the world in which we need to live in, and we all need to live within those things. But when it comes to everybody else who's running around in fear, doing workarounds, you don't have to chase them in their workarounds. Even Christians will be driven by fear and be doing workarounds. You don't have to fit in with what every other Christian is doing. You can follow Jesus on the narrow road, and there's great hope and power and love and peace in holiness, in the way of God. God created this world with an order that the world has never known. There's never been known a sovereign creator over all things. He has that. He has all things under control. You don't have to control your circumstances. You don't have to control the people in your life. You don't have to control the outcomes. You don't have to produce the outcomes. Your God is in control of all of those things. You don't have to be like anything else. There's so much hope in allowing yourself to be holy unto the Lord, trusting in him for what he can offer, because he can offer that which those things that present themselves as gods can't. When the people of Israel moved into the promised land, they found some of the very same things that they remembered in Egypt. These little statues and these gods. And the Canaanites would use those statues as a part of their worship. Now, they all knew that these statues had no sort of intrinsic power in them, but those statues were mediators to the God that they felt like they needed to please, right? They want to have a baby, they need to please the God of fertility. If they wanted to have a harvest, they need to please this God. If they wanted this, they wanted power, they wanted victory in war, they had to go to these different gods, and they would use these mediators to get to the power. There's no value in them. May I bring this home to help us see that fundamental to the word mediator is media. Every single one of us walks with a lot of media in our lives. all sorts of media that has, I didn't bring my phone up here. The phone has some sort of value in it, right? But its power is where it brings me. The power of my television screen isn't in its luminosity. And yes, I could go get a newer television with more power and luminosity. It's where the TV brings me. I'm going to take a pause here. Media brings us somewhere. And just about every media that we handle brings us into something else that's going to tell a story about your life. You are not. They have something you don't. It's their fault. You're a victim. You should be here by now. What's wrong with you? I'll tell you what's wrong with them. Every single media is telling you a story. I say that because we need to name it and be aware of it. I'm not suggesting that we all remove phones from our lives, but I would like to suggest 2 applications for our series. I'd like to suggest for the next 12 weeks, you take on maybe a couple new digital health practices. Set yourself apart as holy in some way. I gathered a list of 30 habits, you might say, that you could try to make yourself a little bit more digitally healthy, less connected to the powers and the stories they want to tell you about who you are. Just what if you protected yourself a bit? Protect your story. Protect your sense of self. I want you to protect your story. And the second thing is, I'd encourage you to practice your story. What I mean by that is turning on the modem and connecting with God. And if you're not in a habit of reading the scriptures, may I encourage you just try to read the book of Genesis one chapter at a time. And as we go, we're going to also learn some specifics when it comes to prayer. We want to grow in accessing the very simplest pieces of equipment that God has given us so that we might be able to protect our story and practice it. So that when we hit the fork in the road, or we don't know what to do, or our leader's been up on a mountain for 30 days, we don't have to do what everyone else does. We know who we are. We know our story, and we know how to take a next step. No matter how vulnerable it is, no matter how much courage it takes to take it, we'll be able to take it. Why? Because we know who we are. We're going to go out there, and there's a hurting world. And I want to bring you back to the story that Rachel shared. When Jesus saw the crowds, he saw that they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. That's not your story. You have a shepherd. We have a world that's hurting, and we could be those shepherds. We know our story. Let's step into it. Let me pray. Jesus, we know that you have stepped into history. You have stepped into history for us. But not only did you step into history, Jesus, we didn't get to talk about it today. We know that you were there at the very beginning of history. You were with the Father from before the creation of the world. And when we lost our way to know what humanity really is, you stepped back into this world to show us true humanity. May we find you on that narrow path. May we have courage to follow you there. In Jesus' name we pray.